How does the heart of a city, its urban core, impact the health of the city as a whole? That's the question behind a new exhibit at 516 Arts, which brings together planners and architects with artists, students, and community members to envision a place where creative connections foster growth and entrepreneurship. NMIF producer Megan Kamerick sat down with several participants in an upcoming public forum on building the creative core to talk about how arts and creativity can foster a lively urban center and promote economic development.
I want to welcome Suzanne Sparge, director of 516 Arts, and some of the people who will present at the forum on February 13th. And that includes Katia Crawford. She's a professor with the UNM School of Architecture and Planning. Rick Rennie, he's chairman of the Downtown Action Team Board of Directors. And Gabrielle Ubayez is with Working Classroom, deputy director. Thank you all for coming and talking to us. Suzanne, I want to start with you. I want you to give us a quick sketch of Heart of the City, the show that is opened here in downtown Albuquerque. What is it? What are the goals of the exhibition and the project?
Well, Heart of the City is an arts collaboration that explores the urban environment, and it will be shown at 516 Arts, which is a nonprofit in the center of downtown. And what we did was we teamed up with about 13 different organizations where we matched lead artists with student apprentices and collaborators. And each project explores some aspect of downtown informed by the students and the youth involved in the project. In addition to the exhibition, there will be a series of public art projects, a couple of murals that are already up, and also public programs throughout the spring, including this panel called Growing the Creative Core.
So why are you linking culture and community to economic development? So it's not just art, it's much bigger than that.
Yeah, well, the arts are really a key building block in community development, and we wanted to show that and also bring a lot of different kinds of people together, diversify the people at the table who are talking about the future of downtown Albuquerque and issues of our urban core. We really wanted to examine this question of what the condition of downtown says about the heart and soul of the whole city.
And the panel on February 13th will have how many people total? Kind of what's it going to look like?
There's 9 people, and technically it's a forum rather than a panel. Okay. But each of them comes from a different place in this creative process of creating downtown's core, and it's a mix of artists, arts developers, planners, and educators who are all looking at this question. They'll each present a short piece about their own projects that they're creating downtown. There are a lot of new things going on and in the works that many of us who are even in this field of focusing on downtown don't know about what the others are doing. So we really wanted to bring together different folks to the table to include youth in that process and artists and mix it up with the planners.
Why focus on something like this, on culture and creativity?
Oh, the creative core is key to the growth of any city, and if you look around the country and around the world, every city is trying to find its creative core and establish it, because creative core creates values for others. That's essentially what happens. The way that occurs is by ideas, and if you create a place where ideas can come together and mingle and encounter support and experience conflict, good things happen. Out of that comes creativity, innovation, and acceptation, which drive the economy and drive communities.
What was that last word?
Acceptation.
What is that?
In evolution, a feather is a perfect example of acceptation, because a feather was originally developed through evolution for warmth. Yet the nature of the feather, being the air flows through the fibers, later in the evolutionary period it became used for flight. But the original purpose of feathers was not, the evolutionary purpose was not for flight, it was for warmth. So many things, inventions we enjoy today, in fact most, are really acceptation. The microwave oven was a magnetron used for radar in World War II to catch the Nazi planes going in to bomb England. And it wasn't until some guy accidentally melted a candy bar in his pocket that they put together, you could make an oven out of this. And then there are all kinds of...
how does that, and so how are you using this word in the context of this?
Well, when you get ideas together, when you get people in the creative core, and when you've got artists, scientists, engineers, technicians coming together, and they sit down and share ideas, amazing things happen, because there are processes that work for inventions and innovations that somebody can use for something entirely different. But unless they're sitting there talking to that person, they don't see it. I mean, the Neo-Nurture device is a neonatal warming device that's just got implemented in Africa. But they were trying to figure out how to save these babies, and it was a $40,000 piece of equipment that nobody could fix when it broke. So a bunch of people got together, looked at it, said, you know what, everybody there has a car and knows how to work on a car. So they built an incubator completely out of car parts. Headlights, all the switches from a car for almost nothing, and now they're saving hundreds of lives, and everybody there knows how to fix it when it breaks because they all work on their cars.
And so I'm sensing what you're talking about, this having this creative core is also a way to foster entrepreneurship.
Yeah, entrepreneurship, in my definition, is creating value for others. So it's an integral part of it. And the arts play a huge role in that. The arts bring, arts is all about ideas. And really, it's the exchange of ideas that makes that happen. And I mean, history has shown us that chance favors an open, innovative system.
So what does a thriving creative core look like to you? What would that be?
Well, we're getting signs of it. I think it's
Okay.
It's a place where coffee shops, I mean, are where the first coffee shops. So it's where the ideas happen. All the studies that have been done, they don't happen in the expensive laboratories. They happen at the conference room afterwards, or in the coffee shop, or people meeting on the street. So the streets really need to become the incubator. And with the Innovate ABQ project, I think we're getting much closer to that. We're getting phone calls from people that want to be close to that. People more interested in coming downtown, performing with the arts. Public art and spaces, and what art does to transform a space. I mean, there's a space for ideas in your brain, the neurons, and that's where an idea comes from. And I believe there's an external component, which is what the creative core is. And the arts and culture play a huge role in establishing the environment where the ideas can be encouraged on externally like they are internally. So what 516 has done, the two new coffee shops springing up downtown, the Brew and Zendo, and they're all examples of that coming together. And companies are expanding downtown. It's very exciting.
I want to turn to Katya because you work in architecture and planning. So, you know, there are wondrous things we can do with technology right now and the internet to come together and collaborate across the globe.
Sure.
Why is it still important then to have physical spaces where people are going to come together and enjoy the arts, culture, and exchange ideas?
Well, I'm hoping that we never reach a point where we're just completely immersed in the digital world, but the physical world is where that's essentially our laboratory, in a sense. We care passionately as designers, landscape architecture, architecture, planning, even from the small object to the larger scale. The city is our sort of fabric that we work with. And City Lab downtown is a partnership between the city and UNM.
What is it?
It's essentially the students and faculty, and it's run by Michael Pride at the moment, and I have a small sort of part in it with this 516 Arts program, is to have a physical sort of presence right downtown that to strengthen the connection between UNM, the public, and the city. But with design, it's not just in this sort of isolated realm. We're trying to foster that relationship to make it more public, make it more realized, and also bring in professionals from the community. So students engage in design ideas. We push them to think outside of the box. They're really good at doing that anyway. And then bringing in, having conversations with the city, with officials and city officials, and also with professionals. So,
yeah, I mean, I know that often, maybe not so much now, but in the past, like architecture and design, it's often been done without thinking through, like, how are people going to use this space? You know, sort of like William White looked at in his book City.
Right.
So do you see that as a way to change that? And having the community more involved with what they want if you've got an empty parking lot.
Absolutely, and I think that one of the primary sort of interests are these void spaces that exist in the city as possibilities, as potential for realizing design, and to really elevate the language of design and the definition of design in a city. Because in a city, it's the whole city can be seen as an artistic core or the creative core, right? It's not just these isolated incidences, but we all know when we go to a place and it resonates with us. And it's called sense of place or genus loci, or, you know, it resonates with us. And Albuquerque, I think, has that. It has that, but it's competing. It's competing with, I think, Santa Fe, and it's still struggling to find its identity. So we're interested in helping and exploring the idea of the creative core and the identity outside of the cliche, outside of the balloon fiesta, outside of all these things that are very powerful in terms of Albuquerque, but that really situate us in a 21st century city and what we want to be. And I think part of the strength is having these younger voices in landscape architecture, architecture and planning to think about the type of world that they want to live in. It can be a pretty powerful. So, and making that visible and open for discourse is a huge part of it.
Well, you bring up young people, so I want to turn to Gabrielle for a moment. You are with Working Classroom.
Yes.
It's this organization that works with young people, artists, actors, writers. What are you guys doing around this project? You're working along the Borealis corridor, I believe, right?
Yes, and Working Classroom has a very strong relationship with downtown. We were located on Gold Street for almost 20 years and moved to the nearby neighborhood of Borealis, just south of downtown. Our students are working with a lead artist, have been walking the streets, seeing downtown and the connection between downtown and Borealis. With
Historic corridor,
Historic
by the way,
corridor.
the Camino Real.
Yes, which goes straight into the heart of the city and is going through its own redevelopment now and thinking about how it can connect to downtown as an art and culture district. So I think Working Classroom really brings young people to the table in terms of caring about being a part of civic engagement, but also specifically downtown. I'm also an alum of the program, and I think being able to be part of a program where we would, walk through the streets of downtown and take photographs or do projects where we were doing a plein air painting of the buildings downtown really gave me a sense of what it is to live in an urban center. And after moving away from New Mexico for a while and living in big cities, I knew that moving back, I wanted to live in downtown and that I wanted to walk places. And I think that's something that we really try to instill in our students, is taking advantage of all the things that an urban place can provide and appreciating them, because I don't think that Greater Albuquerque always emphasizes things like public transportation or walking or popping into a coffee shop and then walking to the Chemo Theater to see a film. And we really instill in our students that interest in living in an urban environment.
Why is it important to include young people in this conversation?
I think that right now downtown is especially geared towards that 21 plus crowd. And I don't think that it's intentional. I think that as young people start to come to the table with ideas or ways they want to participate or spaces that they want to activate, there might be more of a need that businesses and entrepreneurs can fill. And it can also, I think, as our youth grow up and become entrepreneurs themselves, they'll want to invest in having their business downtown. And I think that's a very unique perspective.
Well, I want to, as we're coming to a close, turn back to Suzanne for a moment and give us some of the details. This is all these people, and some others are going to be on a public forum.
Yeah, we'll have a total of 9 people at the public forum on Thursday, February 13th at 7 p.m. at 516 Arts, which
516 Central.
Yep, between
Southwest.
5th and 6th downtown. And the Heart of the City exhibition is on view through May 3rd, and there are many, many public activities throughout that period. There are also public art projects to view on Warehouse 508. There's a new 180-foot-long mural by guest artist Aaron Noble and apprentices at Warehouse 508.
This is a detail from it?
That's a detail of the Energy Cube. It's called Quantum Bridge. It's really a phenomenal piece, very exciting for Albuquerque to host this mural. And there's also a mural by Larry Bob Phillips on the Century Theater building downtown.
I saw this
which is
yesterday.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Created with CNM students, and there's a video installation on the exterior of City Lab that Katya has worked on with 2 of her collaborators there as well. So we encourage people to come down for the public forum on the 13th and go to our website to see the whole schedule and the guide. Our website is 516arts.org, and people can call us at 242-1445.
Oh, great. Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
having
for
us.
having us.